Hello, good evening, my ghouls and goblins. This is Miss Red, and welcome to Insomniac. I am your host, as I said, Miss Red. And what we do here is we talk about the weird, creepy, and strange things in our history and in our present and possibly in our future. So, sit back and enjoy. And just so you know, the makeup is a special treat for everyone. I do have a little bit of props going on tonight, and so I figured I'd complete the look with some scary ghost ghoul makeup. Oh, yes. So a little bit about me. Right here, right now, this wonderful contraption all over my head is called an EEG machine. And actually, some of the things that we're going to talk about in our particular show today were the first steps in making it happen. But needless to say, it was a lot of trial and error to get right where we are. So, yes. So, a little bit of back history here. World War II was the real turning point for a lot of things as far as medicine and scientific research goes. The Nazis, we have to give them a whole lot of credit for a lot of things. They were creepy, weird, and gross people, but they also gave us a whole lot of inventions that we just would not be able to do without today. So, yes. In December 9th, 1946, an American tribunal opened criminal proceedings against 23 German physicians, and administrators that had willingly participated in what was listed as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Out of this, we got what is called the Nuremberg Code that was established in 1948. That basically states to us the voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential in order to do medicine or any sort of scientific things on humans. And the benefits have to outweigh the risk. So, but before that and after that, we still see a lot of times in history where even our governments did not listen to the Nuremberg rule. So, yes. Unfortunately for you animal lovers, there are still tons and tons of countries out there that have absolutely no laws as far as animal testing and animal cruelty goes. So yes, some of these creepy and gross things, I'm warning you now, will involve animals. We go to our first candidate here. Prison inmates. So, we start at the top of the list. Unfortunately, prison inmates have been tested on since, well, we formed prisons. So, slaves and inmates have always been tested on. And they have been used as test subjects until the 90s. So it wasn't until the 1990s that the first world countries started saying, hey, let's not do testing on our inmates anymore. And yeah, they did all sorts of crazy experiments, anything from injecting them with different medicines and experimental vaccinations to cosmetics to shock therapy, which helped create this thing right here, this magical thing that reads brain waves so they can tell if you have seizures or not. Yeah, because of course the undead queen does happen to have a few screws loose. So, but yes, they did removal of organs. They injected them with household chemicals. They dismembered them. They sodomized them with different things to see what the effect would be on that particular end of things. Electrocution, lobotomy, gender reassignment, cosmetic and pharmaceutical testing, and much more. So, yes. While some people may not necessarily have any sort of empathy for our inmates across the globe, have to admit, it takes a pretty messed up psyche to be like, okay, let's take this human being and completely make them not human anymore, pretty much through testing, use them as a lab rat against their will. So, number 2, Henrietta Lacks. Anybody hear of her? Yes, another almost half undead creature in herself. Henrietta Lacks in 1955. She was the unwilling donor of cells called the immortal human cells. Hers were instrumental in creating the polio vaccine, and actually a lot of vaccines after that. Her particular cells went on to help her family members afterwards, her descendants, be able to cure AIDS, even though they didn't get any of the rights and royalties to it, which is the really messed up thing here. If you're going to take a dead girl's cells, at least give her family the proceeds. Am I right? Am I right? Seriously. Somebody hacked me up and they made a multi-billion-dollar invention that saved billions and billions of lives after that. I would love to see my family paid. Just saying. But unfortunately, yeah, Henrietta unfortunately was put into an unmarked pauper's grave as her payment for her cells being stolen from her body in order to make this happen. But we all need to give her thanks, because I don't think any of us would be alive in here in order to be enjoying this show right now. So yeah, poor Henrietta, may she rest in peace, and thank you so much for your contributions. Next creepy critter on the list we have is William Harvey in 1598. So he had this crazy, creepy theory. It was called the blood flow theory. Ooh, blood. Tasty. So he was a royal physician of King James I. You know him? Know him? Wrote the modern Bible, modern Holy Bible. That most of the modern versions of the Bible are based off of. Yeah, this guy worked for him. His top position, right? So he believed that blood was made by the liver through our food, which is no, not right. Not right. Anybody know what blood is made by? Anybody? Our bones, correct. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, our bones. That's what makes our white and red blood cells, is our bones. Thank you. So, but liver does filter out toxins, so he had it half right. He did figure that it was a filtration system as well. But yeah, he, like I said, animal lovers beware. This guy hacked up animals and everything and constricted their arteries while they were alive as public demonstrations of his theories. Okay? Okay? And then he moved on to willing human participants. Now, understand that willing meant that he usually found really, really poor people and paid them a couple of shillings and didn't tell them what he was going to do to them beforehand. So willing, that's a little speculatory. I mean, I guess that depends if you believe that withholding the truth is not a lie. So, but yes, he wrote a book on all of his wonderful, crazy theories. The Galen theory is what this has been called. And of course, the blood flow theory. And so, that was publicized in 1628, and that particular book is banned in a lot of medical colleges in the Western world because it's freaking crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, I've seen some really crazy, warped things in my existence, but yes, this book is a weird one. So if you really want to get creeped out and freaked out, it's a good book to read. It's called the De Motu Cordis, or The Motion of the Heart. So, yeah. Now, almost everybody in the Western Hemisphere has heard of this guy. Well, this guy, like many scientists, as you're going to find out, did a lot of stupid things to pretty much prove a lot of his theories. And one of the craziest ones that this guy did, I'm about to tell you about. But who's the guy? It's Sir Isaac Newton. And what did he do? Well, it's from 1665 to 1666. He had a fascination with light. And so he took prisms and put them on his windowsill. And he observed that light refracts this, that, and all that wonderful stuff, right? Now we understand about eyes and how we see how colors happen in a beam of light, which has helped with lasers and all sorts of wonderful technology, right? Well, the other thing he was curious about is how our eyes happen to function to be able to even see that light in the first place. So what was his grand scheme in proving how this works? He took a needle and shoved it back behind his eye. Yes, behind the eye. Okay? Yeah. Now, with that, he did prove his theory that we must have something in the back of our eye that makes us see these colors, which we do. There are little things in the back of our eye that fire off, which enable us to identify color. Okay? And so he did prove that in a certain rudimentary form. But he also went blind for almost a week because of this. Another time, he decided that he was going to stare at the sun for a few days and see what happened from overexposure with light in the eyes. And again, he went blind for another 3 days. So, yes, Isaac Newton, one of the most brilliant men, one of the most known men in Western culture, and as far as physics and science, and he's definitely that borderline between genius and insanity. Am I right? Am I right? Yes, he is. Another lovely scientist that liked to do crazy things. Unfortunately, her crazy things were primarily out of ignorance. And this one we may know as Marie Curie. So Marie Curie was a brilliant young woman, and she was born at a time that women weren't really allowed to take credit for their own work. It just didn't work that way. So, okay, 1898 rolls around. Her and her hubby, okay, she went to college, and her hubby was actually a professor at the college. So they lived on the campus, and they were able to get the college to allocate them some funds so that they could have their own little laboratory shed to perform experiments in. So, yeah, her hubby, Pierre Curie, they met in Paris. I wouldn't say that their marriage was highly passionate or romantic, but they were definitely intellectuals with the same types of goals, and they could get along real well. And Pierre was just stunned by her brilliance, so he was all on board with it. But yeah, so they built their little tool shed, their little secret tool shed lab thing on the campus. Okay. And I'm sorry, Pierre's brother was an engineer. Okay. He was a very brilliant engineer. He also liked to do a lot of carpentry work. Okay. So between the three of them, they designed and built the electrometer. Now, what's the electrometer? It's a thing that helps you basically tell you the strength of an electrical current. Okay? So, yeah, cute little thing. I have one of my own. It's got little red and black toroids. You stick it on the conductors and see exactly how much juice can run through it or is running through it. Brilliant little machine. So these three invented this thing together. Okay. And they also started looking at these different rocks and minerals. Okay. There were these different rocks and minerals that were starting to be refined and mined as almost an after effect of other different things like precious metals and things. They were found in the same area. And they started to have a fascination in the scientific world because they would glow or they would radiate energy. And people didn't really know a whole lot about them, such as thorium and radium. So, Pierre and Marie, they want to know all the properties that radium and thorium would have. and what they could do with it. So they worked all the time and any time they could in this little shed. And the thing is that they would be doing some sort of study thing, and Marie especially, she was always forever in the shed, right? Being the badass woman that she was hell-bent and determined to find out exactly what this stuff did. And she would carry these things around in her pockets. You know, she'd go to lunch, she'd go run her errands, and she'd carry some of this stuff in her pockets, never knowing the truth that we know today, that this stuff is lethal and causes cancer and causes erosion of the flesh and all sorts of things. So, unfortunately, she ended up passing away. They were able to figure out that what was happening was radiation, and they actually named it radiation. That's also where the name radium comes from, is that it was radiating molecules out. But yeah. She died from radiation poisoning, obviously, because of all the crap that she was putting her hands on willy-nilly all the time. She did end up winning 2 Nobel Prizes, though, in 1903 at the World's Fair, in 1911. So yes, it was nice for her to be able to see her work actually get Nobel Prizes for them, because, yeah, she died. Radiation poisoning, leukemia, 1934. Ivan Pavlov. Everybody knows about the bell and the dog and the salivation thing, right? Well, here's the thing. The version that we know is completely incorrect, and the real version is way, way creepier. Okay? So, 1880s to 1900s, there was this dude, Ivan Pavlov, right? He was a Russian physiologist. Okay? Russia, yes. You didn't guess from the name of Pavlov. So, yes, he used dogs as test subjects and everything, of course. And so, yep, the truth is way more gruesome. He cut the head off of one dog and hooked it to a blood dialysis machine to see how long it would stay reflexively responsive. So yeah, he did. Yeah, that was Pavlov. That was one of the things that he did. Yeah, he was kind of having a moment of, oh yeah, because another scientist that we're going to talk about a little bit later did similar things, and Pavlov just wanted to see if his theories were actually correct or not. And since he had the dogs and he didn't know what to do with them, you know, this was his way of exterminating them after he did what we're about to talk about. Yes, the famous salivation experiment was actually performed by taking 7 dogs, strapping them into a feeding station, okay? Like they strapped them in almost like cattle, okay? Okay, and then performing a series of different stimuli on the dogs, one presented with meat. So it could be bells, it could be buzzers, it could be, and quite often it was a buzzer. So what would happen is the dogs would be strapped in, right? And Pavlov actually took and he put a tube down each of the dogs' throats. Yeah, each of their throats and into their and out their stomach, right before their stomachs and everything, that it emptied into a bucket. Okay? And so whenever these buzzers would go off and his assistants would come in with meat to serve to the dogs would salivate and fill the bucket. Well, after a while, anytime the buzzer rang, the dogs salivated and filled the bucket. So, yeah. So this experiment was very, very gross and creepy. Nobody's 150% sure exactly why he chose this particular method, but it did teach us a lot about physiology and how it relates to psychology. And psychology being things like PTSD and how to try to habitually get somebody from not experiencing bad bouts of PTSD. So it proved the brain could be trained, okay, even for responses. Pig bladder limbs. So this is actually a modern one. This is a modern day horror. Okay. So 2000s to present. Scientists utilized the recent Middle Eastern conflict, which left many veterans lacking appendages. Yeah. To try and find a way to stimulate human body to grow new body parts. You know, you go into war, you lose a limb, it's a devastating thing. It pretty much destroys your life. So, these wonderful creatures out here that we call scientists decided to take pig bladder, because when pig bladder is dried into a powder, it's called extracellular matrix. Okay? And it's been used to regrow fingers and eat and regenerate muscle tissue in an injured Iraqi war veteran. So, yes, the Iraqis were definitely the first ones to try this out. How the heck they figured out that pig bladder would turn into an extracellular matrix that would help things be regrown, I have no idea. But they did it, and it's there, and it's done did. And we have a lot of these types of experiments, humans being grown in the belly of pigs, in the uterus of pigs, this, that, and the other. There's all sorts of types of experiments. Human ears being grown on the side of mice. These types of experiments are still extremely common nowadays. And so if you want to get freaked out, just look up modern day animal experiments. Another modern freak out, RFID implants. What the heck is that, right? So that is a thing that's been happening since the 90s. Okay. It's a radio frequency ID device. That's what RFID stands for. Radio frequency ID device. Okay. The chips. They've been put into pets since the late 90s. Now they're wanting to put them into you. Okay? And, yeah, what these chips are supposed to be designed for, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about them because of everything that's going on as far as the vaccine controversy and all that, and, they're putting chips, mini chips into the vaccine. Here's the scoop, though, kids. They don't have to get you to put a vaccine into your body to put a chip into your body. And I know that here's the thing that's really, really freaky. Everybody's freaking out about RFID implants. Something else that's been being done since the 90s is you're being monitored every day, all day, by some device you voluntarily put in your pocket. And it does all of the things. Tells prisoners or prisons, hospitals, companies, all that stuff where your location is. It can tell them your medical history. It can grant or deny access to documents. It can grant or deny access to buildings. It can tell them your identification, your social security number, pretty much anything that you have willingly put through the internet, through your cellular device, is now property of your government. Don't believe me? Look it up. So, as far as RFID implants, many prisons in the United States are actually already using this so that they can track people, so that we can reduce the amount of serial killers and serial rapists that are in the country. So, yeah. And as far as actually, and they're also using it for dangerous immigrants, people that have been in the United States jail system more than once for rape and torture, and they keep booting them out of the United States back to their home country, and they keep coming back. They chip them now, like pets. So they can be like, oh, ding, ding, ding. This jerk does not belong here. He needs to stop, he or she, they need to stop taking our resources, right? So, yes. Unit 731. Anybody hear of Unit 731? How about Pearl Harbor in Japan in World War II? Well, from about World War II to the 1990s, Japanese universities and medical schools were allowed to use prisoners of war and Asian civilians as guinea pigs to develop killer diseases like anthrax, cholera, the plague, and other pathogens. Yeah. I know that this is something that has come out in the last couple of years, and people didn't realize that, a lot of the pathogens and stuff that we know of today, to a certain degree, have been amplified and made worse by our different government sanctions. Almost every first world country on the planet has their hands in the pocket of a scientific lab. Okay? It's a proven thing. They have to let you know about some of them. They don't have to let you know about all of them, but they have to let you know about some of them. Well, here's the thing. How do you know a pathogen is going to work on humans unless you test it on humans? Yeah. And which humans are you going to test it on? I don't know. Again, going back to that inmates and prisoners testing. Prisoners of war, well, let's just say humanity has done worse with their prisoners of war than that, although some of these things like anthrax and cholera and the plague and not treating it, syphilis, and letting it go into horrible disease, writhing pain for the people. What do you think? Tell me what you think about that. Would it be worse to be a prisoner of war and, say, be tortured and slaughtered in medieval Europe or by the Aztecs and the Incans? Or would it be worse to be in one of these internment camps and be pumped full of pathogens and then forced to work and walk all over the damn place while you're rotting to death inside? I don't know. I'm not sure which one would be worse. The next two, okay, these two we're going to do together because they did the same dumb thing at 2 different times in the same laboratory, one after the other. One was the initial dummy scientist, and the next one was the predecessor and did almost the same exact thing. Okay, so yes, we got Harry Dockley in December 15th of 1945. Okay, so he was working with bombs and trying to figure out how to make nuclear bombs really work good, right? And so he had a bomb with the 2 halves, because if you put the halves together, what happens? Boom. Boom happens, right? Nuclear meltdown. So 2 halves with the plutonium on the inside, you put the halves together, it creates just the friction pressure, and boom, flutes up. Well, see, Harry Dockley had this wonderfully creative way, okay, of keeping the 2 halves pulled apart. Okay? Yeah. He decided he decided that he was gonna put a brick inside of it, right? In between the 2 halves. Unfortunately, that didn't work very well, as you'll see next. But before that even happened, they were trying to get the plutonium into the actual lab, right? So they had it in this big box, the big reinforced box and stuff, and they had it in the back of, I'm assuming, like an SUV type vehicle or something. Well, they were going to put it in the lab, and Harry dropped it. So, of course, that made a core meltdown right there. And unfortunately, him and his assistants that were helping him out, they both died of radiation poisoning really, really shortly. Well, apparently somebody got this thing into the lab. This guy, of course, died. And just like that, the government turned around and hired his replacement. And his replacement was Louis Slotin. Okay? Louis Slotin, May 30th, 1946. That's when he died. He died because he thought it would be a great idea. He got it all assembled and everything, got the plutonium in there and had the 2 halves. He took what was it? It was like a mixing stick, like a painter's mixing stick or something like that, or a knife or some shit like that. And that's how he was propping it up to keep the 2 halves from closing together. Because there was an actual safety encasement that was supposed to be the thing that you used to pull it apart and then settle it back together without actually making it collapse and go off, right? But apparently the safety encasement took way too much time. People wonder why we have OSHA. Okay. And so, yeah, he just shoved, a painter's mixing trowel in there. And he did this quite a few times and everything until one day the painter's trowel slipped. And, yeah, kaboom. Radiation poisoning galore, melting flesh, wonderful bad news bears. So that's that. And the last guy that we're going to talk about, 1940s. I promised you I'd tell you who was the inspiration for Pavlov to have done the experiment with dog head, right? You remember the dog head? With the blood filtration system? Yeah. This is the dude. Vladimir Demikhov. Russian scientist. Yeah. So this dude had a fascination with transfers. And I mean organ transfers and transplants and all that sort of thing. And of course, he used for his test subject dogs. Okay. So, this dude transferred a dog of a dog head of a small young dog and put it on and transferred it to another bigger, older dog. Okay? He did this with actually kind of successfully with quite a few dogs. In fact, I think the longest, two dog chimera that he created lived almost a month. But still, it was horrifying, And of course, when he would have the second head, I guess the satellite head, as you would call it, the secondary head that he had sewn in there, go to eat, well, that it would just drool all over the place and not actually benefit the dog because he didn't have the esophagus hooked up. He just had like the heart and some of the ligaments and just, yeah. But yeah. But he also did a lung transplant on a dog and stuff. He did some work with heart transplants and stuff like that. He is considered the father of organ transplant. So while his experiments were horrifying, we cannot, in good conscience, entirely keep this freakazoid from being on the props list because he was the father of transplants. So, yes, we're creepy gross, right? Some of those wonderful, horrible medical experiments. So, and of course, there are hundreds and hundreds more out there. That is just the ones that I picked out that I found the most interesting, weird, creepy, and gross. So that have some decent contributions to our way of life today and will have decent contributions to our future. But still weird, creepy, and gross. So, anywho, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I hope you guys can finally sleep and stay creepy, stay weird, stay scary. All right. Love you guys. Bye-bye. Why, hello, my ghouls and goblins. Good evening or good morning, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome to another episode of Insomniac. I am your host, Miss Red. Hi, hello. And just a little intro for today's look. We have, oh goodness, I already forgot her name. Echo. Echo, the Echo the nymph. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the story of Narcissus, but she was the nymph that actually ended up wasting away and killing herself because she fell in love with Narcissus, and he pretty much told her he'd rather die than be with her. So yeah, I thought that a story about narcissism would go fitting with our particular theme today, because our theme has a lot to do with vanity, and that is weird fads, traditions, and rituals throughout history. Now, most of these are pretty recent. Some of these are historical, but they're still wild, weird, and creepy, just like a lot of the old Grecian and Roman gods and goddesses and their stories were. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy, and I hope maybe you get a little freaked out. So, the first one on our list is called butthole surfing. Yes. Okay, butthole surfing and butthole sunning, because it's called two different things. It just depends on where you're at. And this is a fairly new trend. So there are groups of communes out there that believe that you can get all of your energy purely from the sun. Okay, they actually believe this. And so because of this, they have abstained from eating or drinking pretty much any mortal food. And they'll just stand out in the sun for hours. Well, some of them got the brilliant idea that, excuse me, they could just, turn their bottoms towards the sun and absorb the energy that way. So there are places out there where you will see these communes in California and the Carolinas of the United States, in certain parts of France and Italy and southern UK, where you will see these groups and communes of people, and they have their booties up in the air, completely bare to the world, out in the morning sun, getting their first meal of the day. Yeah, the pictures are pretty funny. So if you want to Google it, I'd say go for it, because the pictures are hilarious. You will not be disappointed. So far be it from me to judge anybody's choice of faith practices, but good luck. Good luck, you guys, and bless you from all that is good. Okay. Number 2, still going with the crazy modern cult idea. This one has actually been around for a very, very long time, and it is eating dirt. Okay, and I mean eating actual dirt. So there is still a commune that is in the Carolinas, and they eat diatomaceous earth. Now, diatomaceous earth is filtered out and processed earth, and it's actually used in a lot of clay masks and cosmetics and things. And yes, some people eat it. They swear to goodness it helps like clean out the colon, clean out the system. Now, eating a little dirt in your lifetime isn't bad. In fact, they do have a point. It will clean you out to a certain degree, kind of like a substitute for grains and greens and things of that nature, to help sand out the colon a little bit and get rid of dead, unwanted bacteria that's not supposed to be in there anymore. However, when you eat a lot of it, the problem is that it can cause ulcers, it can cause rips and tears in your stomach and your intestines and, well, other places. It can cause hernias and hemorrhoids, and it can even result in malnutrition and death if it's done for long enough without also observing a proper balanced diet, like majority of diet fads. So, but this one is exceedingly dangerous for the people that practice it, because not only do they practice it as a dietary supplement aid, they practice it as a religious sanction. So they do this every day, like 3 times a day before they sit down to eat a meal. And all I can say is I don't want to be in line for that bathroom break, because I guarantee it takes them a little while. Yeah. Staying with the idea of consumption, eating the dead. Now, this is another one that has been done since, time ancient. Many different cultures eat their dead. In fact, that is part of the reason why cannibalism is not considered, cannibalism in itself is not illegal, not in the United States and not in the majority of first world countries. And this is part of it, because for some people, it's actually a religious practice to eat their dead, as well as some other things that we're going to talk about along the line here in this list. But when a loved one passes on, especially in a lot of Gaelic pagan religions and a decent amount of South American religions, and there's actually an island that is, out by India, that they practice this regularly. And their idea is that if they eat their deceased loved ones, then they'll be a part of you forever. They'll be able to preserve their memories and their good times with these people this way. There's also still a decent amount of native tribes throughout the world that still eat their dead enemies, because the idea there is that if you eat, for example, you eat your enemy's eyes, then you can see what the enemy armies are doing, that sort of thing. If you eat, their flesh, then you can feel what they feel. You can move how they move. And it's just that sort of mentality there. So cannibalism is alive and well. It is as much, we are apex predators. We can't get around the primal urge of consumption and competition. We just can't. In first world societies, there's a lot of people that do try, and I applaud them for their constraints, but we will never get past the fact that we are and always will be the apex predators of planet Earth. And we are driven not only by our genes, but by our physiology to consume other creatures, and in a dark way, be completely competitive with each other, thusly destroy each other and aspire to absorb each other's power. It's in our nature. Okay. One side cannot fully exist without the other. Yep. The sunlight means nothing if the shadow isn't there to reveal it. Another one that's interesting, and this has actually become very, very trending in the modern era as a way to, how do I put it, a more radical phenomenon and event that goes along with extreme piercings, and it is called hook suspension. So what they do is they take a set of hooks and they actually implant them into your back along the sides of your spine. So it's almost like a set of eyelets on a shoelace, and then they will, once it's all healed up really good, and they will hook ropes and lace ropes up through there and hang you from the ceiling. And some people have reported that they get kind of a euphoric high from this, that it activates a certain chemical. We have this certain chemical in our that our brain produces. Some people might know it as the date rape drug. It's called DMT. Our brains actually produce this stuff, and this is the chemical that kind of makes us almost like delirious and hazy and see angels and shit right before we die. Well, supposedly hook suspension can also prompt the body to release this chemical. And so people have said they've had awesome prophetic visions. They've talked to deceased relatives one-on-one. They've talked to their angels. They've talked to demons. They've talked to gods. They've transported to different dimensions. So yeah, it's a very primal thing. And I don't know. Maybe if I wasn't so darn scared of having that stuff put in my flesh and getting infected, I don't know, might be up for the challenge. But I actually have a couple of friends that they've done this. And of course, once the hooks are in, they're in. So there are some drawbacks. But yeah, so. This one was actually made popular very recently by Kim Kardashian and her sisters, but they are not the first ones to do it. They're just the first ones to make it popular. It is the vampire facelift. It sounds a lot more creepy than it is in a certain way, and I'll explain why. So the vampire facelift is they will take some of your own blood and they will filter it out and refine it. And they'll like extract the platelets and stuff from your blood, and then they will inject it directly into your facial tissue. And that does sound kind of weird and kind of gross. But at the same time, we do this sort of thing all the time. We do it with organ transplants. We do it with donating blood. We do it with replacing teeth. Sometimes they'll replace it used to be they would replace teeth with cadaver teeth. That's a little more difficult to find now, but it still does happen in certain countries. Taking parts, and they're even doing a procedure now. I don't know why it took them this long to come up with this, but they'll take and they'll liposuction some of your fat lipids out of like your thighs or your tummy or wherever you want to get rid of fat, and inject it into your chest and your butt. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess no pain, no gain, right? They say beauty is pain. Well, speaking of beauty being pain, this one is come out of fashion, and in a lot of places in China, it is now actually illegal. And it is called the golden lotus. Now, it sounds beautiful, right? It sounds really super beautiful, right? So, in China, I forget which dynasty it was, but they started this wonderful idea of, we want our ladies to be soft, and we want our ladies to be, delicate flowers and stuff. So how do we make this happen? Let's encourage them to deform and break their own feet, okay? Yeah, so that's what they did. They would take babies and young girls, and they would have them bind up their feet into this weird little decrepit thing, like this. And it looks like an unopened lotus flower, okay? And the idea was to get your foot as small as you possibly can. And this was a sign of wealth because, she couldn't walk, which meant she couldn't work. And so this was supposed to be something that was very fashionable. And it was actually a fetish. It was like a society-wide fetish, excuse me. They actually had like adult intimacy manuals that were written
on different things you could do with a woman's broken gimpy foot with the lotus. So the object was to get it like small, really, really close up and small. And if it was like super duper small, like infant baby size small and you're an adult woman, that was called the golden lotus. And those were considered the most beautiful feet of all. Now you can see, and you can Google this, or if you want, you can go over to China, and there are museums where these shoes still exist. In fact, there are still a few ladies today that suffer from the affliction of this trend. And it's like, but yes, as it got to be necessary for both genders to be able to do work around the house, to keep a household going, China started, a lot of China's different villages and cities and towns started to outlaw this tradition. Plus, it's just ridiculous. A woman needs her feet. It just, as imperial dynasties fell and communism arose, and communism's like, yeah, we need people to work. Stop messing with your feet. Then it fell out of fashion. But I think the last place that it was legal in, it was as recent as like the late 80s. So it's been around and they've been doing it a long time. But yeah, it's like, I hate feet. I just, feet weird me out. My own feet weird me out. About the only time I touch my feet is to take care of them hygienically, or if I have to paint my toes real quick, and that's about it. So this whole thing to me is creepy and weird, and the fact that there are adult erotica books instructing you how to do foreplay with it, just no. Forgive me if that is your thing, if feet are your thing. That is just my personal opinion. That's just, especially a woman's decrepit, gimpy, broken. Okay, so humans, we've always had a history of putting things in our bums. It's just how it is. We have fascination with the exit end of our system. Yeah. And so one of the things that we would do frequently is enemas to try and clean our system out in some way, shape, or form, to get, for many reasons, more hygienic intimacy practices, obviously, medicine, especially, this, that, and the other. So there's a couple of different types of enemas that have been kind of weird throughout things. Animal blood enemas were actually kind of a common thing back in the Grecian and Roman eras. So they would take the blood from a pig or a cow or something, a creature that they had slaughtered for human consumption, and they would bathe in it to a certain degree, kind of just take a bucket and douse it, and then they would do an enema, and this was supposed to help kind of ward evil spirits and demons from seeping into your skin and giving you things like acne or dermatitis or syphilis or any of that sort of thing. It's kind of like the start of the miasma theory that you see in Victorian era times, where, bad air will make you sick. Kind of the start of that. And then, of course, they'd go to the local bathhouse and bathe in everybody's germs anyway. So yeah, the next one throughout history that's kind of notable is the smoke enema. The smoke enema is actually is actually kind of middle finger from the Native Americans in North America to the English. So the English knew that Native Americans did a lot of things as far as mythical and spiritual medicine. And so some Native American traders were trading with American traders, and they convinced them that smoked tobacco enemas could cure pretty much everything. So there are actually kits, and you can buy them like on eBay and things, the actual vintage kits with the bellows and the weird tube thing and the whole 9 yards. And so, yeah, they would take and, light up some tobacco in this bowl and take the bellows and the tube and talk about awesome vengeance. I love it. The third one is the coffee enema. This is the new one. This is the hip new thing. So the idea is that all of the benefits that you can get from coffee from ingesting it or putting it in a face mask on your skin, you could also sort of get it the other way. And so people use coffee enemas to clean out bad bacteria and things out of their colon and their digestive tract, just because of the acidity, just to tighten it up, and to also get a energy boost. So we also have beer enemas. Now the Incans were the ones that made beer enemas really popular. That was their favorite way to get drunk. But of course, because of frat parties and things in the United States and Northern Europe especially, beer bong enemas have now come back in style. So there's 4 enemas that, I mean, if you're going to put something in your bum, another thing with Batch traditions and rituals is, gentlemen, please forgive me for the next one, but this is the narcissism when a certain species is so obsessed with their own intimate anatomy that they have festivals about it. So the Romans had a penis festival, and there are places in Japan and China where they still hold penis festivals. Yes, you heard me right. The male phallus. People dance around in costumes and with statues and different types of sweets, and can buy things from vendors as souvenirs and whatnot. And they will construct giant statues of a human phallus. And this is supposed to be a symbol, of course, of strength, virility, fertility, just all those things that we deem very, very masculine. So, unfortunately, there hasn't really been festivals dedicated to the feminine anatomy in the same sort of fashion. There have been things to different gods and goddesses that were given, the epitome of femininity, such as Venus or Demeter and Hera, all that sort of thing. Isis in Egyptian mythology. But as far as worshiping the vajayjay or the Twin Peaks, no. There hasn't really been a festival until the women's rights movement of the 2000s really took hold. So that's, whatever. It's man's world. But still. Anyway, so yeah, some people might find it weird, creepy, and gross. I find it hilarious. But anyway, so there's a lot of weird fads and trends through history and still today that we do with our teeth. A lot of weird things done with the teeth. For example, in Elizabethan times, it was fashionable to black your teeth out or to eat so much sugar, if you were an upper class noble, eat so much sugar that they rotted and turned black and fell out. For peasants that couldn't afford sugar, they usually took charcoal or something and blacked out their teeth. Again, there are places in Asia where this is still considered beautiful and fashionable. Again, the Incas did a lot of tooth filing, and they would file them out down into little points. Now, this looks creepy as all get out. Anybody seen the movie Sleepy Hollow? And Christopher Walken's character, the Headless Horseman's character, and his teeth, he had filed to points. Yeah, that's what the Incas used to do. And they found this beautiful, okay? It was part of their culture to find it beautiful. But yeah, really creepy thing. And of course, there are different things like drilling holes in your teeth and hanging jewels, little jewels from them, drilling holes in your teeth and outright sticking a gemstone into it, or gold, or all sorts of different crazy things. So yeah, people have been mutilating their teeth for fashion for a very, very long time. Something that is found very, very odd and creepy to other cultures is the fact that in the West, we like to bleach our teeth. And the reason why is because it destroys our enamel over time, thusly making our teeth rot, turn brown and black and gross, and fall out. So there's a lot of cultures that they find our teeth whitening process that we do today so adamantly to be very creepy and strange. But yeah. Okay. I mentioned that there was another thing that went along with cannibalism, and the reason why cannibalism is still considered legal but socially frowned upon in most cultures is because of placenta eating. So, of course, anybody who's had children knows when a baby is born, it comes in a sack, right? And once the baby is out of that sack, the body needs to get rid of it, right? And when it comes out, it looks like a big old bloody steak. This sack is called a placenta. It is a tradition in many cultures, and a fair amount of religions, that the mother and other family members and even members of the community and the neighbors will consume this sack, like fried up like a steak or something, or liver and onions, or eat it raw. And this is supposed to give medicinal properties and give good luck and good fortune to the families, the community, and the kid throughout the kid's lifetime. Now, medicinal property-wise, yes, the amniotic sac, or once it's expelled from the mother's body, the placenta is full of tons of vitamins and minerals. However, the problem is that you still have all of the problems that you do with consuming human flesh. You still have the problems of prion disease. You still have the problem of bloodborne illnesses, all that sort of thing that go along with that. And just to mention, it's definitely weird, creepy, and gross. But for some cultures, even today, and some families, even in modern day societies, this is a tradition. And they do it with every kid that's born in their family or their community. So, declaring animals as dignitaries. This is one that has also been throughout the ages. From the times that the Egyptians honored animals such as cats and dogs, and snakes, and goats, and crocodiles, to modern day towns in America declaring cats and dogs as mayor. People have always loved their pets and always loved their animals. So our fellow animals on this planet have always been extremely important to us, and we adore them. And so, yes, some cultures, like I said, have taken it to the next level and made their pets, given them the honored privilege of being called gods and demigods. Some of them, like I said, even in modern day, I believe there's like a cat and a dog, and they're both each mayors of towns in the United States. And there's a goat, and I think it's a cat. There's like a goat in Sweden that's the mayor of a town, and a cat in Germany that's the mayor of a town. So yeah, even today, even in modern culture societies, we still adore our pets enough to give them honorary titles. And of course, there is the infamous thing of Caligula, the crazy Roman emperor. Supposedly, he made his horse a bishop. Now, that is speculatory. There's nothing that's actually documented that says that Caligula did this. In fact, most people are pretty darn sure it was more like because his dignitaries were a bunch of idiots. They just were. They were spoiled, old, out of touch assholes, really. And so it's thought that maybe at one of his infamous dinner parties, he just kind of chuckled and said, I'd be better off making my horse one of you than having you guys serve as one of you, to his dignitaries and to his senators. So that's where that comes from. Like I said, it's not really historically documented. He actually said that, just like Marie Antoinette's "Let Them Eat Cake" and Nero's thing that he supposedly played the violin while Rome burned, which is impossible because the violin was not even invented yet, let alone in that area of the world. So, but we do love our stories and our gossip, don't we? So yes, long story short, animals as dignitaries and gods and goddesses, still a tradition that's very alive and well today. And I guess in a way, even from a capitalist and atheist point of view, we kind of do the same thing with the whole, like the Netflix show, Don't Mess with Cats, Don't F with Cats. It shows how much we do love and cherish and value our pets, almost to the point where we do honor them. Well, we do honor them as family. In fact, a lot of people honor them as their children. And we do almost honor and cherish them like they're gods in themselves. So, all right. So, yes. And the last one that we have for the evening is vaginal steaming. So, this is a modern trend, but it's a variant on a Grecian trend. So back in Grecian days, they loved their baths and they loved their saunas, but they were more of a fan of saunas than they were baths. And that's because of their particular hygienic cultural beliefs. So they had specific steam stations that were meant to push the steamed coal-laden air towards different parts of your body. And so, yeah, they actually had like a steam table that a woman would kind of squat over the coals. Well, this concept has come back into fashion. So you can go to a vaginal steaming spa and get your vajayjay steamed. And what it's supposed to do is help your vajayjay rebalance its pH and help it sweat out toxins and all that wonderful junk and tighten it up. Okay. Just like any, if somebody was doing a steam treatment to the pores on their face, it's the same kind of concept. It's just for your intimate areas. Now, my problem with this is that as long as you're already practicing good hygienic practices as a woman, your pH should be fine. your pH should be golden. Because your body is self-cleaning and it's meant to do what it does on its own without your help. In fact, if you mess with it too much, you can cause yourself medical problems, right? So yeah, putting steam in your hoo-ha seems like a really bad idea because of that. Second reason is, I don't know about anybody else, but I haven't had a burn in that particular area of my body, and I would prefer never to have one. And steam is one of the quickest ways to get a very serious second or third degree burn, because the moisture collects in your skin, traps in your skin, and because it's moisture, it stays at that temperature and boils the cells around that steam droplet that's now in your skin. And so that's why steam burns are almost the worst burns on the planet you could have besides chemical burns. So, I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. Awesome, fantastic. But there are definitely safer, less scary methods to make that happen. To get the therapy that you seek. And so, yeah. Huh. So yes, those are weird fads, traditions, and rituals that we have as living creatures. Yeah, oh my goodness. So, which ones did you find to be weird, creepy, and gross? Which ones did you find to be kind of hilarious? Which ones did you want to try? Because, some of those might be appealing to try. I'd really, really like to hear from you guys. What's your opinions on these things? Because, I mean, and like I said, pictures for any of this stuff, you will be shocked, amazed, and a laugh. I'm telling you. It's brilliant. So, yeah. But anywho, thank you so much for joining me tonight or today, whichever is your preference there. I hope you guys have a fantastic evening, day, night, whatever. And yeah, hope to see you next time. Until then, stay creepy, stay weird, stay strange. Love you, creepsters. Bye-bye. Hey, my ghouls and goblins. This is Miss Red. Just giving you guys a shout out, a little bit of a call to action here. If you guys have any questions, comments, or there's something weird, creepy, and strange that you would like to see next time, just hit me up in the comments or see me on my group, Miss Red Center Motives. Leave a comment here on Heart and Soul Promotions, or you can check me on my page, also called Miss Red Center Motives. So, but until next time, stay weird, creepy, and strange. Good night.
Good evening, my ghouls and goblins. Welcome to Insomniac. I am your host, Miss Red, and tonight we have a very, very special, near and dear to my heart subject for you. So, let me ask you, what do you think of when you think of witches? Do you think of cauldrons, maybe? How about crystal balls to see your future? Maybe you think of weird, creepy, and strange things in jars. Weird, dusty jars. Well, all of these wonderful gimmicks and things are awesome and dandy, but the truth of witches is actually a lot more damning and a lot more scary. So, we have for you weird facts about witches. Oh, by the way, for any of you practitioners of witch or pagan history out there, Merry Ostera to you guys as of the 19th through the 22nd. Many practitioners know there are 8 major holidays through the calendar. And as a practitioner myself, wishing you guys Merry Ostera. Yay! Happy springtime. A little bit of introduction. Now, most of what I'm going to cover is going to be about Western culture, like Northwest Hemisphere witches. There will be some little things about witches in other places, but most of it will be more Northwest semantics because that's where the most horrendous things happened. So, the word witch comes from an old English word, and it is witchcraft. Okay? Witcha is the masculine. Witche is the feminine. Okay? And it means a skilled or clever person that practices sorcery, right? So at least that's what my Book of Shadows says. So the main subjects of study for these people are usually theology, religion, folklore, technology, science, diabolism, and of course, sorcery and magic. Because before things really started taking off with science and technology, anything that was considered a mystery was considered magic. And there were tons of things. Almost everything was a mystery. So people got very superstitious about it. But yes. So our first fact. There are witches in every faith and every culture. They could be called sorceresses, or witch doctors, or medicine healers, or priestesses, or priests, or, they're known by many, many names. But their functions, shamans, their functions are pretty much the same thing. So, every faith, every culture practices magic. Even going into the Abrahamic religions with prayer and consecration of the temple and the Holy Sacrament, those are all things that were derived from rituals and practices of when paganism was a big thing. The blood of Christ, body of Christ. We take this Holy Sacrament, we sing a song, we do a prayer. Everybody practices method. So, creepy, weird, and strange fact, because there's a decent amount of the religions out today that don't really think of it that way. Number 2, most people convicted of witchcraft were not only innocent, but they weren't burned. Okay? So we're talking about the particular era of like the 1400s until the 1700s. Now, there were almost 100,000 people that were killed convicted and killed as witches during this particular point in time. However, the idea of the witch being burned at the stake has been more dramatized via Hollywood just because it's more spectacular on camera than hanging, which is how most people were killed at that particular time. was by hanging, by stoning, some of them by drawn and quartering. There's only been a handful of times that it was documented that a person was actually burned for being a witch. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, wood was not cheap. It's not cheap today. It wasn't cheap then. Okay. And people would much rather use that wood for their cooking fires and to build their castles and their armaments and all that sort of thing than to use it to burn tens of thousands of witches. Okay? Wood is expensive. Wood takes time and a lot of craft, even firewood. So, yeah, very practical reason why the whole burn the witch isn't really accurate. All right, number 3, King James. King James the First, the writer of what we know as the modern Holy Bible. Okay, he commissioned to have the most infamous witch hunt manual in his name. Okay, you have to understand something about King James the First. King James the First was a smart man, but he was also a little bit crazy. He was like 4th generation incest, as many royals were back then. And he went to go collect his queen from across the sea, and her name was Isabella. Well, a storm came out of nowhere and threatened to sink his ship. So he was late collecting his bride-to-be. Okay? And instead of thinking, oh, okay, the sound there, the strait between England and the mainland, because of how it's shaped, always has weird freak-ass storms, and this is just how it is. It was like, no, it was witches, it was demons, it was this. And so this started this forensic panic as an excuse to anyone that seemed to have powers of the divine or something beyond what should be humanly capable for anybody but the church. Yeah. We're going to go after them. We're going to take them out. So yes, he wrote this book. He had this, he approved it. Most of it was written by bishops and priests that he had assembled. Probably the same, like 60 or 70 gentlemen that wrote the Bible for him, wrote his version of the Bible. And he probably skimmed through it with his advisors and then signed off on it. Okay, this sounds good. This sounds awesome. So yes, but he wrote this thing called the Malleus Maleficarium. Okay? And you can get copies of this thing. Yes, that's Latin. I forget what the English translation is for those two words, but that's something you can look up if you're interested. But yeah, it has kind of basic instructions on how to capture witches and demons, how to identify witches and demons, just all that sort of thing. So yeah, go King James. Number 4. In reality, there was no real rhyme or reason to being accused as a witch. Okay, so when all of the horrible witch trials and stuff went down, as is the case in most countries, so for example, the eradication that happened in Haiti, the eradications that happened in Russia and Czechoslovakia, all of these places, America, there wasn't any rhyme or reason as to who could be labeled a witch. It could be, oh, your neighbor's got a mole. So that's the sign of what they called a witch's teat, which is they would have familiars, which were pets that are actually demons in animal form that were sent to them by the devil to be able to talk to the devil back and forth directly. Okay, that's the point of familiar, and the familiar helps them out with their stuff. Well, how these demon familiars ate was they suckled on this witch's teat.
And supposedly, this witch's teat could be a mole, it could be a beauty mark, it could be a boil, it could be a wart, which is horrible because, you know, syphilis and all that sort of crap was still very prominent back then. So the likelihood that people would have skin imperfections was super high. Yeah. So, and, you know, it could be something as simple as, oh, she knew to use rosemary on the chicken last Sunday at the Sunday supper. Oh, she's using potions and herbs and she's poisoning people. She's a witch, you know? Or, you know, oh, my neighbor's cattle. His cattle is always better than mine, always more thick and plump. So he must be using witchcraft, you know? It just, all these stupid, crazy things. In fact, the majority of the Salem witch trial specifically ended up, it was a political struggle between two great families in Salem. And they both wanted to pretty much own Salem. So they were blaming each other on witchcraft. And it wasn't until the governor, I think it was the governor of Virginia, came up and his wife was accused. It wasn't until then that it was like, okay, this is horse crap. Enough is enough. You guys need to stop it. But anyway, I could go on for days about this stuff. And how insane people were when they accused people of being witches. And that's just, you know, that's just the practical things. You can read, there's tons of books more of court testimonies of what people claimed they saw people do, like having relations with the devil in the woods and flying and all this sort of crazy nonsense. The last person that was accused of being a witch was accused in the 20th century. There's a lady, her name was Jane Rebecca York, okay? And she got this great idea because at the turn of the century, late 1800s up until like the 1950s, a practice called spiritualism was really, really big. It was huge. Why? Because there were wars going on. There was famine. There was drought. There was all sorts of crazy stuff going on in the world. Excuse me, that people were dying at an exorbitant rate. You know, World War I, World War II. You got the Spanish flu. You got all sorts of different things. The Great Depression. All sorts of things going on that are causing people to die at an exorbitant rate. And so people wanted to find solace. They wanted to find connection with their deceased loved ones. So they committed and kind of created this subset religion called spiritualism. And spiritualism is based on the prospect of talking to the deceased to find out the answers of different things. Okay? To tell the future, to find things that are lost, whatever. Excuse me. So Jane Rebecca had this brilliant idea that, like the Watts sisters during the Victorian era in the 1890s and 1900s, that she would put on a little show. And so she had tables that were specially built to rock and turn and all this kind of stuff. She had rooms that were specially built where pictures and mirrors would fall off the walls, this, that, and the other. Okay. Well, somebody discovered her little house of horrors was not what it seemed, but a trick. Okay. So she was brought to trial, and she was accused as a witch because she was defrauding people with phony seances. So people by that point in the 1940s, because at that point the OTO and Aleister Crowley and all that had come along, And so people were getting more educated on alchemy and what real magic looks like, I guess, so to speak, like real ritual magical practices. And so people were furious to find out that this woman had been scamming people who were just so sad and desperate for answers for their loved ones, you know? And so, yeah. And no, she wasn't executed, although that was tossed around because she scammed so many people. She was actually fined 500 pounds, which for the 1940s was a decent amount of money, but still. So yeah, 1940s. Last time somebody was fouled and convicted and went to jail because she did spend, like, I think it was 2 years in jail and had to pay a fine of $500. So yeah, so pretty recent history. All right, number 6, the peaked hat that we all know and love. That's the witch's hat. This is so jacked up. I don't know if I'll wear the peaked hat again. I think I'll stay with my cloak hoods. Stay with the traditional pagan culture robes. Because the peak hat is not which originated, okay? But Jewish. Yeah, anti-Semitic. In 1215, Pope Innocent III, this guy was a piece of work. Pretty much anybody that wasn't willing to bow to the Catholic Church, he wanted them dead. Or he wanted them enslaved. Okay? So his wonderful idea, because people have pretty much hated Judaism and people who practice it since Jews became Jews, honestly, which I think is crazy. But Pope Innocent III convinced Rome that the Jewish community had to wear Judean hats. And these hats kind of look like a dunce cap. And they must be worn to identify the enemies of the church. And then, of course, later that expanded to anybody that, practice a religion other than the traditional Abrahamic Christianities and witchcraft and paganism. So yeah, it's like I read that and I'm like, you just ruined my childhood. Oh, so yeah, my peaked hats are going in the trash. Number 7, flying with mandrake. So yes, there are rumors about witches flying on brooms, and there's actually documentation of people admitting that they flew on brooms. Okay? There's a couple of ways that this could be kind of true in a certain perspective. So, mandrake root. Okay? Mandrake root is kind of along the nightshade family. So, nightshade is like tomatoes, the belladonna, potatoes, that sort of thing, okay? And one of the main characteristics that eggplant, all of these types of plants have atropine in them. And atropine is, it's a compound that can make you hallucinate, okay? Mandrake happens to have quite a bit of this compound, and also compounds called scopolamine, okay? And so, they would steep it and make tea out of it, and then they would drink it, and then they feel like they're flying, okay? Because in small doses, yes, it will make you hallucinate and give you a high like you're flying. Large doses, it'll kill you. So that's why mandrake, the members of the nightshade family that are high in atropine or scopolamine today are usually illegal in the United States at the very least, such as belladonna, aka deadly nightshade, and mandrake. But yeah, so the other thing is there is a type of yeast that's found in bread, especially in unleavened bread, that when it starts to mold, it creates a toxin that can make you hallucinate before you get sick and you die. And that they believe that this yeast toxin could be another effect that made people think they could fly or they were cast under a spell by somebody. So yeah. Watch what you eat because you could become it. Okay, number 8. Yes, the first recording of witches were actually in the Bible. So yeah, King Saul is the dude in the Bible. Okay, King Saul was one of the rulers of the Christian lands and stuff. I think around the Byzantine era and the Persian era. I'm pretty sure it was that after Emperor Constantine. But King Saul, he sought the first witch, okay? And this documentation of the Bible was actually written in 931 BC to 721 BC. This is from the original Hebrew Old Testament Bible, right? And so King Saul sought the witch of Endor to help him raise Samuel's spirit from the dead to help him defeat the Philistine army. Now, the Philistines, they were just a bunch of reckless brutes. They didn't care what they trashed. They didn't care what they raped, pillaged, nothing. That's why if somebody calls you a Philistine, it's actually a very high insult. Okay? So, the Witch of Endor did bring back the spirit of Samuel to talk to King Saul. And basically, Sam prophesied that King Saul and his sons were all going to die within the next 24 hours. And wouldn't you know, the sons went into battle. They were some of the generals that were leading their dad's army. And when he found out that all of his sons fell in battle, King Saul, out of grief, did away with himself. So, yeah. So it's a weird, creepy, and strange story. And this is, the first documented witch in anything that could be considered remotely historical text. Number 9. Remember how I said everybody practices witchcraft? Well, atheists and nihilists do too. Why this is a weird, creepy, and strange fact is because a lot of people, with atheists, it's like they believe in a universal energy, but they don't put a face to it, like a deitic face to it, like God or gods and goddesses, a pantheon of some sort. And nihilists, they believe we came from nothing, we will go back to nothing, and everything here pretty much means nothing. Okay? And so when people hear of atheists and nihilists practicing magic, they go, what? It kind of gives them a mind freak. Here's the thing. Atheists can believe in energy, and a lot of atheists, that's what they do. They believe in the energy of the universe. Kind of along the way of Buddhism, except without the Buddhist disciples that go with it, and the Buddha itself to go with it. But they believe in karma and universal energy usually. So of course they'll do rituals and things to make their energy better and higher. Nihilist, it's part of the practice of, since all this doesn't really mean anything, I can practice and kind of push my weight around the universe to help me make things that I want to have happen today. So when you really sit down and talk to these people and get to know the rationale behind their practices, it's pretty practical. But so yeah, everybody practices magic. Number 10. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, okay, the largest recorded gathering of people dressed up as witches. Now, I mean like witches as we depict them today, like with the hat and the black cloak and the long flowing, robes and all that sort of stuff with the broom and all that sort of stuff. That sort of witch, okay? But the largest recorded gathering of people dressed up as witches is 1,607. Now, this happened at a festival in 2013 in Sortlaida, Spain. So, yes, much of Spain and Portugal are very much, yes, there's a lot of Catholicism, but there's also a lot of connection of pagan roots and things. So a lot of people will practice different Hispanic variations of Santeria. And Santeria combines Catholicism and witchcraft. Okay? Kind of like the Enochians. Okay? But yeah, so they have this festival, and I guess the biggest attendance that was recorded was in 2013. And I personally think that's kind of cool, but some people might find that weird, creepy, and strange if they don't like witches. So there you go. Number 11. The number of practicing witches are on the rise, okay? For example, it was like 8,000 practicing witches in 2008 in the United States. This is the United States, okay? In 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, that number turned into 1.4 million in the US. And by 2020, it turned to 3.9 million in the US. Now, what makes this a weird, creepy, and strange fact is that anytime the world goes to see cataclysmic unrest, people get interested in magic. Okay? It's a thing that helps us cope with the sense of hopelessness that we have inside of us. Okay? And so you'll see a revival of Wicca. Okay? You'll see a revival of paganism. You'll see people purposely trying to find out about their inherited roots. Like, I don't know, Ancestry.com. Yeah, that sort of thing, so that they can practice the rituals and things that their ancestors did to try and get a better grasp on life. So it's kind of weird and creepy because of the psychology that goes behind that. It's kind of the last breath before mass hysteria, unfortunately. If you go and you look through the cycles of time and you track the influx, the rise and fall of popularity of magic worldwide, and what cataclysmic things happen in history, that cycle kind of goes around. So yeah. Practicing witches are on the rise, so maybe it'd be time to pay attention to your surroundings. Number 12, the first ballet and the first official Western novel.
were both inspired by witches as the main heroines. So I found this kind of cute and kind of interesting. But yeah, witches have always enchanted us because something mystical and just magical and everything. That idea that this beautiful creature can just make miracles happen and make things appear out of thin air has always been something enchanting to us, especially when it comes to partners in life or gods and goddesses. So the fact that Circe, which is one of the goddesses of the circle of the moon, ended up being the main heroine of the first ballet ever recorded, and Celestia ended up being the name and main heroine of the first Western novel ever written. Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. And it kind of ties right along with the number 11, magic provides an escapism from things that are out of our control, which some people might find creepy. So, yeah. And last but not least, number 13. Wiccans can be pagans, but not all pagans are Wiccans. Okay? Here's the thing. So, paganism was established in 1325 originally. All right? And it was a way for the Romans that were starting to, really, really get into the whole gung-ho Christian thing at this point. It was a way for the Romans to identify the village people and the rural people out in the country that still worship their multiple gods and stuff, and basically said screw you to the Christian church, to the Catholic Church, In fact, in Latin, it means rural people who worship false gods. That's what paganism means. And even furthermore, heathens, which are a lot of our Celtic and Viking descendants, the word heathen means pagans that totally denied Abrahamic religions. Like so the pagans, they would tolerate it so that they don't, get burned or sacked or imprisoned or whatever. But the heathens, no, these people would go to war to keep their faith. And their faith was nothing Abrahamic, not Judaism, not Christianity, not Islam. None of the monotheistic big three was in their bag. It was not in their wheelhouse. And they were willing to die for it. They were willing to rape and pillage for it to get to the point that you need to leave them alone. And a lot of our Viking ancestors were in that heathen category because they're Vikings, They thought of themselves as the ultimate people. So why would they give in? So over the years, paganism as a term has become an umbrella term for people that believe in a magical system that is more inherited from the people than from the government. Okay, so it's a very umbrella term. Now, Wicca is actually pretty young in the world. Okay, so there was this guy in the UK. His name was Gerald Gardner, and he, in the 50s, he came into his own as a man and everything. He was looking around. And at this point, the temples of light, the OTO temples, the ones that Aleister Crowley and Rider Waite helped establish, they were there. But
there was so much hierarchy and pomp and circumstances, and some of the rituals were very gruesome and primal, and a lot of the people that could afford to be inducted into these temples were rich people. Remember, Aleister Crowley came from a very wealthy family, so did Rider-Waite. Both Rider and Waite came from wealthy families. So, yeah, basically that style of alchemy was for the aristocracy. And they kind of denoted and debased women, and he was not about that. So Gerald Gardner, he's kind of running around hippie, roughshod around the UK and stuff in different groves and woods and stuff. And he's like, you know what? I want to start a religion that is for the common people, that focuses on magic and respect for Mother Nature and worships the triple goddess, worships the cycle of nature and creation. And thusly, he came up with the word Wicca in the 1970s. It established many books. He established different organizations and churches. I shouldn't say churches, temple houses, because for Wiccan faith, the woods is your church. So yes, in that way, Wiccans can be pagans, because the whole concept of pagan was for the common rural people, the common people, to worship and exist in nature and practice magic outside of the reformed structure of aristocracy and the leadership roles. So that's the difference between Wiccans, pagans, and heathens, basically. I found that very interesting, and it can be weird, creepy, and strange, because a lot of people will say they're part of one and really get pissed off if you tell them they're another. And I just find it really weird, creepy, and strange that people will go completely against what they say they believe in just to prove that they are not what you say they are. So, but yeah. So, alrighty. Well, 13 facts about witches. Probably not the facts you were thinking of, because the really creepy, gruesome lessons or things that they say through history about witches are completely bogus, false nonsense. It honestly, majority of the stuff, I think, is stuff that was created out of bored minds. I mean, you're talking about majority of the things that we fantasize witches to be is from that era of the Salem witch trials and King James I. And so you're talking about the era of Puritans, where they really didn't have a whole lot to do. And this gave them some sort of release, and it gave them some sort of imaginary thing to control people with, that they can really take people to the cleaners with. So, but I hope you guys found that educational and informative. And if you have any more questions or comments about it, please don't hesitate to contact me. That would be awesome. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.